It feels more of like, let's just throw in a shocking twist that you didn't see coming, and it doesn't feel earned.
I did like that Dusk is essentially doing like the future version of juicing. You know, he's taking supplemental nanites.
This might be a hot take. I hated this episode. There was so much that I hate about this episode. Great show. This episode, not so much. It did not do it for me.
Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark and I are talking about the thrilling finale to the hit science fiction TV series Foundation, Season 3, Episode 10, The Darkness, so spoilers are ahead. And we are a small channel, so if you're enjoying the content, we would appreciate it if you would consider giving it a like. And if you don't want to miss any of our breakdowns, then just be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications, especially since after this, we will continue on with Only Murders in the Building Season 5. And with that, what are your overall thoughts of the show at this point?
This might be a hot take.
Hot take.
I hated this episode. There was so much that I hate about this episode. Great show. This episode, not so much. It did not do it for me. There are a lot of things that I take a lot of issues with a lot of things that happened in this episode. And I can't tell if like the choices that were made are because they're just trying to get this to be prolonged or what they're doing with it. You know, I feel like every season has felt isolated in its own thing.
Yes.
And every finale, like, I'll have like grievances with the season, and then the finale kind of ties it all together, and I'm kind of like, oh, I see what they're doing with this. And this one, I maybe see where they're going with it, but there was just a lot of things that I don't agree with.
You know, the funny thing is, I feel like a lot of this is what we predicted, that the Mule was going to be too big to be beat, and that the story would have to kind of continue with that character. Versus the other seasons have felt kind of like self-contained packages, you know, and then plot points from it have a ripple effect that they're able to pick up, you know, the later season and kind of do a new aspect of the story. And so we did kind of predict this, but for whatever reason, getting some of what we expected doesn't quite feel as enjoyable because the previous seasons have felt like we've got so much resolution, and this one feels like so little was resolved. You know, like the last ones have solved the first crisis, solved the second crisis, and this one, it very much feels like the third crisis is still going forward. I do want to say, like, regardless of whether or not we are happy with this, I do think that so David S. Goyer had a plan going out through season 8 from the beginning, and he has been making tweaks to it over time based off of, like, you know, how the writers are feeling, audience reaction. And I'll kind of get more into that at the end, because I read an article about, you know, him leaving. I think that there is a pretty good plan in place as to what's going to happen. I don't think that they're just trying to like drag things out. And instead, I think that it just comes down to, I don't know if we're necessarily happy with some of these choices as like a season finale. Like, honestly, I think that many of the things that ended this are things that I would have been happy with as like episode 8s, you know, like shocking twists that we then have a little bit more time to kind of like unpack the ramifications of like this season.
Yeah, I mean, I might not exactly be satisfied with certain things, but I also don't know if I also love the twists. Like, and there was just, it felt like, I don't know, it felt like some characters weren't acting in normal ways that they would. Like, I feel like what happened with like Demerzel, I feel like things could have changed and there could have been a different way about that, you know, seeing Dusk, you know, go into this kind of psychosis, which is something we kind of expected was going to happen. But like the way he went about it just didn't feel right to me. You know, the whole twist with Beta, especially, I feel like it's fine if you're going to make that the twist, but I feel like the whole season, there's no clues to that. Like, right? It's like Beta was a passive character in this from the beginning, that like Pritchard came to her, and like there's all of these things that was like she was so unloved, and that's why she became the Mule. But yet she would go to these events where she sounds like she has a huge fan base, and Torrin clearly loves her. So like the motivations of what like the Mule, what we thought the Mule was, which made a lot more sense to me. Like it seemed like that Mule was a good Mule, like the actor that plays him shows why he was like crazy and the way he was and why he wants to get love. But like for it to be Beta, and then like you think about like the conversation Beta had with Torrin's uncle Randu, and it's just like that person that was having that conversation doesn't feel like who the Mule is. And like other things, when we see like Beta is in other places, and the Mule that we believe is the Mule is the one taking people over like on the jump station. So it's like there just feels like a lot of things that don't add up to make her the thing. And it feels more of like, let's just throw in a shocking twist that you didn't see coming, and it doesn't feel earned.
The interesting thing is I do think that they did lay out some of the groundwork for this, that it wasn't who we thought it was. I just think that they didn't lay groundwork for who it was, because you did comment on a line about like, does it ever feel like you're living somebody else's life or something, or living somebody else's dream or something like that? Remember you asked about that line. That. You had a theory about that. Yeah. And so I think that there were these hints that it wasn't him, but I do think that there weren't really hints as to who it was. And so I think that part just ends up being this kind of big surprise. I did, however, really actually like the reveal of it. You know, when they did the big reveal and you realize, okay, it's not who we thought it was. Then there was this kind of cool moment where the video effect has stuff kind of blurry to show like there's some mind powers going on. So, you know, the Mule's influence is still there. So then it's like, who is it? And it does, the music is kind of like dum, dum, dum. And it cuts to different shots of different people, you know, to kind of build up the suspense. And it's like, is it Torrin? Ebling? Maggie? And then,
which like I had a hard time with that too, because I'm like, none of those people make sense, right? Like none of those, and even Beta doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know. I think about like her initial conversation with Maggie, which doesn't feel like it, like they just met. When we see the Mule using his powers when Beta's on a different planet, like how does that make sense? Like how is Beta able to like? I think it also brings in the question of how this power works. Okay, can she just control people from planets away? Like, you know, huge leaps of space? Like I don't know. I just feel like it, you know, she was such a passive character. Like Pritchard had to come to her, which Pritchard wasn't under control. Pritchard didn't have the whole Gaal reading thing until he ran up into the actual Mule, or what we thought was the Mule. And I just think that like there just were a lot of problems with it being Beta. I did kind of start wondering, I'm like, why hasn't the Mule taken over Beta? Like he is infesting all these people. Why hasn't he taken over Beta?
I wasn't surprised by that, because he kind of made it clear early on that it is very tough to do it. And so he doesn't want to do it more than he has to. So he infects the smallest amount of people that he has to, and then he does a show of his power to get the others to just naturally fall in line. You know, so it was like that one table meeting where we first saw him with I forgot the kid's name again. Doesn't matter.
Forgettable.
Him, I didn't think she was forgettable. I liked her.
I know. She just didn't do much after.
Yeah.
You know.
So him with the
Skirlet.
Him and Skirlet, and he does the demonstration where Skirlet is going to kill herself, you know, just to show like how how big his power is that he can do this, because she's already under his control. So he doesn't have to do extra work to ask her to do that. And then everybody else realizes, like, holy crap, he could do this to any of us. And then we can do something horrible to ourselves because we went against him. So it'd be better to just fall in line and just do whatever we're told. That way we don't have to get in that position where he forces us to do something that we don't want to do. So I do feel like they kind of set that up. So I don't, once again, I don't think they telegraphed that it was Beta, but I don't have an issue with it being her. I don't know why she would somehow get grabbed by Pritchard. That seems like an odd coincidence, for
right, like Pritchard was trying to break into the party.
For them to be pulled into the story, when they're already part of the story.
Right.
But what I did like and what I did think was interesting was that Beta seemed like a kind person. Her power, she seems to fill people with love. And so people want to do things for her because they have this sense of love. And that seemed at odds with like how kind of psychotic, the male, what's that actor's name? I don't know how to pronounce it.
I forget.
Pilu Aspect or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, that character that we thought was the Mule seemed kind of like psychotic and unhinged, and sometimes like to have people cause themselves harm, which seems kind of at odds with, wanting to like filling people with love. And so I think it comes down to, I do think that the Beta isn't this terrible person. I think that she is a kind of a kinder person. Yes, she wants to take over. Maybe it's because she wants to prevent the darkness. I don't know why she's trying to take over, but she's trying to take over, and she's using this decoy. That way, if something happens, it doesn't happen to her. And that decoy is kind of unhinged, and possibly unhinged maybe because Beta is like filling him with a little bit of her power.
Well, that's what I would assume. Like, it seems like the Mule, who's calling himself the Mule, who has the memories of the Mule, is just being controlled by Beta. So it does feel like all of the actions we saw the Mule do, it's literally what Beta does, which also doesn't feel like her character at all. I don't know. I feel like they were trying to just get this, like, who could be the biggest shock that you wouldn't expect? And, like, she first meets Maggie, which...
Yeah.
This is his balladeer, and then she also lets the Mule treat Maggie like shit. Yeah, she loves Maggie. So there were so many things, like, because like the motivation before was that the Mule feels unloved, and so he is putting love into these people to make him, feel accepted. He surrounds himself in that big party. Like, we even like come to the realization, like the deaf guy, he's like, why is the Mule surrounding himself in the party? Because he's unloved and not loved. But like, Beta is loved. Like, she goes to these things. She's famous. People love her. Torin loves her. And Torin doesn't seem under a spell. Like, it's not like...
Torin might be, because do you remember that Torin was cleared because they said, oh, everybody that loves the Mule, or everybody that's controlled by the Mule loves the Mule. And so that's the person we see that they love. But Torin, you're clear because we see that you love Beta the most. Which,
yeah, he might love Beta.
So that means that 1000% Torin could be under her control.
He could be, but she even looks at him and says, like, I know this is weird, I'll explain it to you, which makes it feel like he doesn't know. Like, everybody else seems to know.
I don't think he does.
Well, I mean, but everybody else seems to know that they're like, I have never felt so much love. Like, they all have this recurring thing. Even Maggie. So it was like, we're peeking into the minds. And if Maggie also loves Beta so much and even said, I love Beta, I would never want to betray Beta. Like, how can we see in Maggie's mind and be like, oh, he clearly is affected by the Mule. We know it. But yet when we look in Torin's mind...
But I think that's weird for, like, the Mule. The Mule is a random person compared to all these other people. Like, Maggie's the only person that's like closely connected with the Mule because they like travel together, and so that's the only one where I could see there'd be a bond. Like in a band where David Grohl of the Foo Fighters might say like, oh, I love this person from my band, because they're a thing, but all of these other people that have like just met the Mule and all of a sudden are saying, I love the Mule. Like, I've never known love like this in my life. That's weird. Like, you just met that person. That doesn't make any sense.
But then this
However,
also brings up the question, is Maggie traveling with Beta or is she traveling with the Mule?
I don't know. But like with like, I don't think it's weird for, like, I think that Torin potentially does have this love of Beta, but it comes off as like childish romance, like, you know, early romance, you know, like, oh, he's wearing rose tinted glasses, you know, because they're doing things that are at odds that most people wouldn't do, like getting married, you know, which is not a thing that people do anymore. And it's because he is, I think, so in love with her.
Right, but that's like where I'm having this disconnect, because like clearly she had a life with Beta. Like she said, oh, Beta and Torin, like we always go to these things. Like clearly she had a life with him. Is she traveling with the Balladeer, or is the other Mule traveling with the Balladeer?
I think the other Mule is traveling with the Balladeer. So David S. Goyer said that like that she gave him a little bit of her power, and she made him think that he is the Mule. So I think that she potentially, like, she gave him the backstory and obviously changed it a little bit so it like fits for him. Gave him the backstory, made him think that he's the Mule, and then, you know, probably gave him like a push in the right direction of like what she would like to accomplish. And then I think that he kind of did a bunch of stuff from there on his own, because the power can't go from planet to planet. So either she was close, like when she was on the planet with him, you know, kind of like affecting things, or he was kind of like doing things on his own because he had gotten that like push in the right direction of like, here's the idea, you got to take down the jump gates, go to New Terminus, take that, or go to New Terminus, take that down, and then we'll head over to Trantor and we'll take that down, you know, and then he kind of like goes from there, thinking that like he's doing all of this, like he is the Mule, thinking that this is his idea.
I guess it doesn't make sense, the motivation of Beta. And I feel like that kind of tells me that if all of the choices that you make in the show that you're presenting can't make me understand what's going on, I have to listen to an interview. You'd be like, oh, well, actually, he can give power. And it's like, well, now it just feels like you're making new rules because the choice that you've made is a completely random one that literally makes no sense unless you have to like explain it after it comes out. Like that, I feel as art, like that makes it like hard to stand on its own. Like if somebody doesn't read this article and watches this 10 years from now and they're just like, none of this makes sense. Like, why would they do this? This feels like a very like wingding way.
That's why I was saying that I think that a lot of this would be a better episode 8, is because I do think there are answers to this, and I think they'll probably come in later seasons, but it's like it feels so out of left field and we don't understand the powers that it seems more confusing than like killer cliffhanger. Instead of like, oh my God, like I can't believe that happened. It's more like, what? Oh my God, what happened? Like, how did that happen? And now, like, how long is it going to take to make season 4? Like, how long do we have to wait for those answers? Because I do think we'll get a bunch of that. And so if this had been like episode 8 and we knew that we'd probably get some answers to it, I think we would be okay with holding on for a week or two.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that's also, yes, it is a problem ending on it. But also, I do feel frustrated that I feel like it feels so out of left field with Beta. That's, I mean, I'm having a hard time with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like there were a lot of things in this episode that I also just like had a hard time with like Gaal jumping out of a space station and not burning up on impact, like on re-entry. Like that felt really like silly. And then she just calls her friend and says, get in position. How does that girl know what position? Like, she's just like, oh, I know Gale's going to be coming in at this angle. So I'll come in right at the angle she's coming at perfectly. And also she had to like whisper ship in. She had to like jump in. So I don't know. Gaal would have burnt up in the space station. Like she was in space. Also, I don't think if gravity's working right there, why doesn't the gravity pull that space station in, you know? Like, it seems like she could just jump and fall. Like, there would be re-entry.
So anything that's like orbiting is technically in free fall, but it just has enough sideways movement that it manages to prevent it from like actually dropping down. And so with her, when she went like the opposite direction and like jumped downwards, that's giving her like the necessary trajectory. So that's actually,
I mean, kind of. I don't feel
it's. No, I do think it's like crazy impossible that she like.
Well, but if you think of the space station and like if like astronauts go on a walk outside the space station, they're not instantly being pulled down to Earth. They're not, they are still in that rotation. So like as high up as she was, like just jumping out a window, like I feel like she's not going to plummet. Like she's not going to be caught in Earth's gravity because she's so little. She's just going to continue floating off into space. And I don't know.
We'll get into it later, but like similar to that, I had issues with like how much destruction Dusk was able to do without anybody stepping in. Like there's a whole we'll get into that. Yes. So I did think that there were a lot of kind of like unlikely things that happened. I did think that it was interesting that when the person that we thought was the Mule was killing Gaal, because he doesn't actually know Gaal and her powers. I don't know if this is real or just like, my fan fiction belief as to like how this happened. It seemed like she was kind of losing. And when he started strangling her, I think that like some of her strongest powers, like her future sight, like even after all the training that she's done, still can only be unlocked when she's in this, mental state where she almost feels like she's dying. Right. And so potentially he might have been better off just like locking her up versus trying to kill her, like potentially gave her that last little push to like unlock her biggest mental powers.
I mean, I think there's a lot of credibility to that because, in those moments we see multiple times where she's like almost drowning, as well as the time when Demerzel took over her. So I do feel like that is very headcanon of why he ended up losing.
Yeah.
But, man, then it also goes back to this other frustration I have where I'm like, we see this version of the Mule and her on Trantor that is still yet to come. We haven't seen that moment. It's the future in the library that we know is going to happen. And we see that it's him. Why do we see it's him? The one thing I do like about this thing is that it also is fine with like switching the actor from season 2 to season 3, because then it's also kind of gives us like, oh, it is the Mule's a vague idea, it could be this guy that looks like this 150 years from now, and then it actually turned out to be him, and now it's actually Beta. So like that I think is actually cool, but also part of me is like, but you see him so clearly, that version of the Mule, and now he's dead. I don't know.
But we did see that might be her memory of going into the future, not like her going back into the future. And we do know that the future can change. For quite some time, her predictions always came true. And then finally, one of them didn't come true, which means that is only maybe the most probable future, not the definite future. The most probable future based off of what can potentially be predicted right now. However, there's always, just like Harry Seldon's math, there are potentially these like few things that can kind of break that. Mm-hmm. Which, speaking of Harry Seldon's math, I think you are 100% right about like him being unhappy that like he is just a tool. And he's the one that like didn't get to put his thumb on the scale. And so at least when he thought he was a key element in the, in the future, like I think he potentially was okay with living this digital life. But now that he finds out that not only is he a ghost, but he's like somebody else's kind of plaything, that, he hasn't been given the full knowledge, like somebody else is tampering with the scales and he doesn't get to do that. And I think that has enough is enough, and he can't live with that. Not that he's living.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I totally think that because of the last season where he like learned that he was not the thumb on the scale, like he was just this passive person, and I think the 150 or so odd years that he's just kind of had to dwell on that has really sent him on a bad spiral. I mean, I really felt bad because if this is like basically the Harry we know, it's like his digital consciousness.
Right.
We saw this weird version of Harry that I've never seen before, where he was so desperate that he was willing to beg. And the fact that like Harry has always been in the captain's seat, he's always been, even this version of Harry, like for the first crisis and the second crisis, he's always felt very in control. And to see him being like, I'm going to beg you, like if I have to beg you, I will do it just so I can get out of this. And I feel like Gaal kind of just cast him aside. And I could see him being a huge crisis thing down the road because he's a AI scorned.
You know, when he thought he was in the driver's seat, it was much easier to make the decisions and live a happy life. I think that getting the information that there was the second foundation, I think that getting that was very similar to what this Harry did to Demerzel, of giving her the paradox bomb, of like letting her see the future, where it's like her whole thing is, I have to protect Empire at all costs. And then he gives her this thing that shows Empire is going away. Here's the clock showing you when Empire is going to end. And now every decision that you do isn't going to change that. And like your programming is going to tell you have to do everything. So like she's probably been busting her ass for the past like 150 years trying to get that to change. And it's pointless. And I think that Harry potentially is going a little nutters for that same kind of reason. Like he realizes that he used to think that what he did matters. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, does it matter what I do?
Yeah.
And it's not even like he can just like give up and disappear. He doesn't, I don't think that he has a way to like activate his own kill switch.
Yeah, maybe not activate his own kill switch, but he definitely can control the vault and like move the vault. So, you know, maybe he could just go vacationing in the vault, like go over to Luminism or actually they don't exist anymore.
They're gone.
Oh, they're gone. They're gone. But like, you know, he could travel or stuff. Like, I think there is a bit of a choice that, you know, Harry's just like, oh, I have to just sit on New Terminus for 150 years. Like, what if you just become an active player? Like, can you just take the vault and drive it right into Trantor? Like,
he can try and do something, but once again, not knowing with the second foundation, like secretly being able to pull the strings behind him. Anything that he does that isn't what second foundation wants, they can potentially like secretly and quietly undo. So then it just feels like it doesn't matter. And you said like, why not like go on a vacation? But he has access to most of the galaxy's knowledge. So I think he could already probably do like virtual vacations to all of those places. And considering the fact that he is a virtual person, in the end, going there wouldn't be any different because it's not like he can put his toes in the sand.
Right.
I think he's kind of at the end of his rope.
I do think we got maybe a hint to how the vault came to exist. Okay, this is a little crackpot theory.
Okay.
But we'll get to this, but there's the moon with the AI at the end.
Yeah.
We know that part of the Prime Radiant was built in this like 4-dimension space kind of thing. And I think that there's a little bit of like outside of time when you kind of build in this 4 dimensions that's not really bound by time. So I could potentially see that this vault wasn't even built yet. And then why Harry was taken with Calais.
Calais, yeah.
That's when he potentially built that. And that's when he potentially uploaded his AI. Because the vault was already there for Terminus, and never once did Harry really talk about building that vault. He knew of the vault, but didn't really And they've also kind of teased like, how did you build this vault, or like, where did this come from? And there's never really been a definitive answer. So part of me thinks that because Calais was also imperative of like that fourth dimension stuff, I think that's kind of how the vault was built.
Yeah, and I've talked about like all the different dimensions that like there could be a kind of a timey aspect. So like I do like that, and I do think that's possible. One of the things I thought was interesting about there were two articles I read, with David S. Goyer, and one of them was interesting because it talked about, his 8-season plan. And I like the fact that he's aware of the fact that, after Game of Thrones, people thought like, an 8-season show, that's great. Like we'd love to do that. But times have changed, and nowadays it feels more like maybe like a 4-season show is more of what people are comfortable with and looking for. So he actually built in off ramps into his plan to be able to end at season 4, end at season 6, end at season 8. So it's kind of a malleable plan that has, potential closure. It wouldn't necessarily get to everything if it doesn't get to 8. Like apparently there's reference in season 1 of, the Invictus and like the writing that was like scrawled in blood. That's something that we'll only get to if all 8 seasons pan. But I do appreciate that thought that goes into potentially wrapping it up early, because that is so frustrating when a show does have a long plan and then it's canceled and it's just left completely unresolved.
Mm-hmm.
That is so unsatisfying. And so I like that they potentially have these like off ramps. Now, if they don't know that they're not going to be picked up for a future season, they may not actually like end it.
Well, yeah, think about this one, right? This season, like it got announced like right before the finale. And like if it didn't get picked up on this episode, then we would just end with what we're seeing. And if this was the end of Foundation, I would be livid. This
would be the most unsatisfying end. I think like season 1, season 2, you could end there and there'd still be plenty of mysteries of like, oh, what would have happened? But at least the main storylines would have been wrapped up enough that I'd feel good about it.
And also, with the continuation of this show, it does feel like with the characters, like, with like Ebling, Torn and Beta, Pritchard, it feels like they did add a bunch of this new cast that really didn't get fleshed out. I had mentioned this earlier in the season that with all these characters. And so now going into the next season, we're not going to have this big time jump. I think in this next season, I
don't know that for a fact, but it feels like that.
I just feel like if there was a big time jump, you would have to have the Mule and Gaal both racing down to another time field, and
right.
The other issues is like, as we saw with what happened with Demerzel and potentially Empire, like characters that were recurring that could span many generations basically seem gone in this season. So
yeah,
I think that's another thing of like why they might have introduced all these new characters to give us a little taste, to be like, hey, like we know that like Empire won't be there next season, which he still could be because we have one Dawn and one Dusk left, it seems.
Is he?
Who? Dawn?
I think he's potentially embraced darkness.
Oh, yes. Sorry. He is darkness now. Yeah. No, he is darkness, which I did like that, where it was like the prediction of darkness coming and then darkness taking over.
I thought that was clever because like that's something that's been hiding in plain sight. Like there's always been the 3 empires, Day, Dawn, Dusk, and one of them transitions right at the very end to dark or darkness.
Yeah.
And, Harry had predicted the darkness. I thought that was a clever tie-in of...
I thought that was great. I felt like that felt really earned. Like, so I feel like all, like the way that the stuff with Empire and Trantor went down, like that feels satisfying. Like we had it teased that, the Dusks, they start to go a little crazy towards the end, and to like save them from that, like they have them ascend a little bit earlier now. Yeah. And so that, and him achieving the darkness. Very, very satisfying. I liked that. However, like you were mentioning earlier, I just had a lot of problems with how he got about doing that. Like, so they just have bombs all rigged to the clone tanks just in case. Like, all these explosive devices, you could just push a button. Nobody's guarding this button. Like, what? He just can go get this at any time. We know that this guy's about to go crazy, and we're like, all right, free roam of the palace. If you find the button that blows up all the tanks, hopefully you don't, because you're crazy.
Also, Demerzel doesn't have a fast mode. She's just like, walk, walk, walk. Like, terrible thing is happening. I must walk there quickly.
I thought we saw her fast mode in the very first episode of season 2. Didn't she fight those?
Oh, yeah.
Like, she is fast. And that's the other thing. When she saw him holding the switch and the baby, she could have instantly, like, grabbed him by the throat. Like, that goes against her programming. All of it. Like, it just seemed like there were so many things Demerzel could have done to, like, intervene in that moment. Or, like, as soon as he hit the thing and she blocked the baby, grab the baby and roll out. Like, what are you doing? Don't just sit there.
It didn't make sense. I did like that that Dusk is essentially doing like the future version of juicing. He's taking supplemental nanites. This is a guy that knows that he's not going out, at least not without kicking and screaming. Like I've got one hell of a plan.
And
I'm going to be jacked and juiced in the end. Like this is one that is planning on living. So even though I do think it's like incredibly unbelievable how he managed this, I do think it was very well telegraphed how he got to this point, from starting the season off with him watching those like videos of the past empires being retired, and then Day has moved Ascension forward because, they're having cognitive issues. And I think it is very clear that he is potentially, those cognitive issues are happening even earlier. And Day should have potentially moved it, like another Day should have moved it even further ahead, because I think this one has absolutely lost it. And I think it really shows like how bad the genetic drift has affected their brains at this point.
Totally agree with you. And I do think his transition was earned. Like all the craziest things were happening to Empire. He lost his brother Day. He lost Dawn. You could feel him slipping, him deciding to kill the Maiden and the Council and Cloud Dominion. Like that felt like we could see his progression going. Like we could feel him like losing the grip of reality, which in the beginning, very first, couple episodes, you kind of empathize with him. You're like, he seems fine. Like there's nothing awful or off with him. And to slowly watch him go down that route, you're kind of like, okay, I get it. And so that felt great. How it all ended was wonderful in that sense. How he got to it, though, that I did have a problem with.
1,000%.
Even with him killing Day, like I feel like Day removing his nanites and him getting beaten up while he still had his nanites, and he was just like that all felt so earned and great. And like even like as much as I love this Day, his death felt very very tragic, but like earned. We knew this Day was not getting out alive.
And at least he did accomplish, like his life did matter. He might not have gotten the goal he wanted because Demerzel certainly looks like she's dead, but at least like there was the connection that was established. And so he was consequential and he did have a great redemption arc. I think unfortunately in the end, he probably didn't know that he was successful.
He feels like he failed.
Right.
He's screaming at darkness. He's like, there is a clear path to the end of humanity. And we had it. We could have been free. She could have been free. And honestly, though, the one redeeming part of this episode was the part between Day and Demerzel, because like there was just from the beginning so much hatred, and then so much understanding from Day, and then actually like risking, he was free, ready to go, but like he knew he had to save this humanity, and so he was like, he went back to the palace and basically like begs Demerzel for forgiveness, and their touching moment, oh my god, that phenomenal. Just seeing Demerzel, like the phenomenal actress, but her, like, this is somebody that's a robot that still has emotions. We've seen her have emotions, and somebody that has cared about Cleon and the Empire in a way that she's never had control of. And this felt like the first time of like, this Empire, this Day is saving me. And like, I felt like I could see true love and admiration for him. She even calls him Cleon, which she rarely does. It's mostly like she'll refer to the Cleons, but mostly it's about day, dawn, dusk. And that was the most heartbreaking moment. Lee Pace, also phenomenal actor in that moment. I loved it. That was the redeeming part of this episode for me.
Demerzel, she was, similar to like Day on his redemption arc and then dying right at the end. Demerzel's freedom is right in front of her, and she certainly looks like she dies right before she can get it. I think because she's a robot, I think there could potentially be, an upload of her program that could allow her to maybe exist in another body. So I don't think it's necessarily it for her.
True. I do think we saw enough of her head, and we know that they can be repaired. And we've also seen in the first episode of the second season, her face got half destroyed. Right. She can repair. So I think that with the piece of her, there could be enough. And that I am hoping for that, because I feel like she is key to Foundation.
Also, she could be, I just thought of this. She could basically be coded into the Prime Radiant, because her knowledge is what completed the data set that the Prime Radiant needed to be able to pull off its math, because it needed a huge data set.
And we did see her go into the Prime Radiant, which very much could have a piece of her consciousness in there as well.
So I think there is a potential path for her. I think that, like you said, that like we can definitely keep the two current Cleons, but I don't think that's a permanent solution going forward. So it's like, how can we? So I mean, regardless if we keep the current ones, we lose Lee Pace.
Well, not necessarily, because Dawn can grow.
That'd be maybe a season, unless they continue this kind of time period for a period of time. I'm probably wrong about this.
Most likely.
On the moon, the heavily voice modulated robot that was talking to the Kale looking robot. That sounded like a Lee Pace with a voice modulator.
I'll have to listen to it again, because I did not even... I feel like in that moment, my mind was just so blown with what I was seeing that I didn't register whose voice it was. But I could see that, and I would hope so, because I love Lee Pace. He's one of my favorite actors. He's such a cool guy. And if he leaves Foundation, I think I'm going to be sad. It's going to be harder for me to love this show if he's gone. And just the range that he's done as different Cleons, like from the first season to this season, I think he's done such an amazing job, and I would hate to see him go.
He's done such a great job of having all these people that are so much the same and so different, which is such a weird balance to strike.
Yeah.
Or at least like so familiar while being so different,
Right.
So that moon certainly looked like it was Earth's moon.
Yeah, that was definitely Earth's moon.
They've hinted at Earth in this, like...
Right.
I think like the painting has a picture of Earth. I think like Demerzel has something that like looks like Earth. So it's been hinted at this whole time.
She's mentioned Earth. Like, yes. There has been a lot of hints to Earth. Now, I'm wondering, like, what does that mean? Because it did look like the moon was very like colonized. Like there were a lot of different structures either embedded in the moon or like on the surface of the moon. So, but also we all think robots have been eradicated, and yet they've been on this little haven that is our moon. What does the planet look like? Is the planet, are they going to pull something where it's like, it's 2025 on Earth and we don't know it, and all the robots on the moon are just monitoring these people and keeping them sheltered from what's going on out there?
Was Kale always a robot, or is this like just a form that she's taken, you know, that's like a familiar form of somebody that people know? I'm curious about that.
She has the ability of the ninth proof of folding. She was imperative to the Prime Radiant as well. I think that she's probably been a robot this whole time.
Something else that was interesting that I got from the two articles, you mentioned that the laws of robotics, like that's from iRobot.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently those two works are actually connected. Like the Foundation books, I don't know if it's like multiple books like related to iRobot. I don't think they were actually initially connected. I think that kind of he retroactively connected them later.
Okay.
So they are part of the same universe. And apparently like David S. Goyer obviously isn't going to spoil things, you know, like obviously he wants to keep surprises. So I think anything he kind of explained at this point is like just like further clarifying things versus like really giving any spoilers. So that is where the like last robots are hiding out, is on Earth's moon, and that Earth has kind of been lost over time because its location has been redacted. So that's why it like hasn't been kind of a central part. And the interesting thing is, in the beginning of Foundation, the rights to stuff from like iRobot was tied up with Fox. And so when he started the show, he got like a list of like, here's what you can use. And Daniil was not part of it. So like Demerzel's backstory, like that's why they could only like reference a robot war and not really kind of like flesh it out and explain it more. And apparently when he was working on another project, it was with somebody high up in Fox. I don't know if it was like the head of Fox. So he just happened to be right place, right time in the room with somebody and was like, oh, this would be great if we could kind of like tell this story, you know, and if we could get the rights to like Daniil or whatever. And the guy agreed with it. And so, you know, he had like a contract written up so that he could get the rights. And so that's why we do have this part.
Interesting. So I have, you know, two kind of thoughts going with this, you know, with David S. Goyer and with these robots on Earth. First, I could see Earth being a very sheltered, limited technology planet because the robots are meant to protect civilization or humans. And so this could be like a fail-safe plan to be like, oh, when Empire inevitably destroys itself, we have this little colony here that we can kind of like cultivate and grow. So that I could definitely see. My question that I have with David S. Goyer is, if he had a plan to go 8 seasons, why does he want to leave early? Like, what is there any knowledge of why he left?
2 reasons.
Perfect. This is what I wanted to know.
Reason number 1, Apple decided to reduce the budget for the next season, which is well within their rights. I think this previous season, the balloon budgeted because of COVID or the writer's strike or something like that. There was something that kind of ended up ballooning the budget. And so I think they're trying to get a little bit of their money back. And he can't see a way to tell the story that he wants to tell with the budget that they are willing to spend. And this is a backbreaking project that like he pours himself into. And the second thing, which is like, if one of these wasn't the case, then he might do it. But apparently the production is in Prague and there aren't direct flights to Prague. So like he can't do a 3-day weekend back with his family. So it's like having something that is like that much effort, that's like that much of a strain away from the family, and not doing it in a way that you're like passionate about is just too much of a bad combo. So
that does make me a little nervous that if he feels like he can't tell the story he wants to, like if this was all kind of his, plan to get to one spot and what we're doing, and he can't tell what he wants to tell, that does give me a lot of hesitation and fears for future seasons.
that could just be that this being his baby, there are so many things that he's dreamed up that it's too tough for him to give up because he spent so much time thinking about it. And somebody else who this is not their baby can maybe come up with a creative way to work with that budget, because they'll be going into it knowing this is the budget. Here's an interesting outline we have. So like we already have a bunch of tools to make something good with it. And they wouldn't be like gutting their own child. They would be, for them, building something new and fun and creative. So I do think that there is a very real possibility, but we'll see,
But we'll see.
We'll see.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you, folks, so much for joining along. And if you made it this far, just to remind you guys, we are a small channel, so a like and a subscription would be great. But you don't have to, but if you do, that'd be great too. Come back next time, as we will be doing Only Murders in the Building, episode 4 of season 5. We look forward to having you then. But until then, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.